Got Coach Zipke here with me today. So we're going to talk a lot about different things. So you also played sports in high school. So you went to Concord High and played soccer there. What was it like playing soccer at Concord High?
It was a good time. I love high school sports, as you can probably guess. I played for George Pinkham at Concord High. That's the current Bow coach. So we had a pretty mediocre team for a long time, but then as we started to acquire more players with skill, when I was a junior, I was the goalkeeper on that Concord High team, and I think, were fourth ranked at that time. And in the second round of the tournament, we lost to Salem in a shootout at Memorial Field in Concord, which must have been fall of '95. And I remember that pretty clearly. I remember sitting on the bench after the loss to the shootout. I'd made a couple saves during the game and a couple saves in the shootout. And I remember Coach Pinkham coming up to me and talking to me about, fall of my senior year, the following year, and being captain and what we could do to prepare for that season and that kind of thing. So that was a good memory. Well, not a great memory losing in the tournament, but a very vivid memory. And then the following year, my senior year, when we thought we were going to really dominate, we ended up tying a bunch of games. I think we tied 4 or 5 games, lost a couple games we shouldn't have, and ended up kind of falling in seed. And yet still being a pretty good team, we won a couple games in the tournament. And then I was telling you earlier, ended up playing the semifinal game that year, fall of '96, at Souhegan versus Londonderry. Got to the overtime of that semifinal game, 0-0. And eventually a Londonderry outside wing, Peter Kinney, took a corner kick. And then one of the Londonderry guys who was often a goalkeeper but was playing on the field at this time, a guy named Jeff Reinhardt, volleyed that in to the back of the net. And I remember I got off kind of a poor dive, whether I slipped or what, I'm not sure. And then there was a guy in my post, one of my buddies, Nate Pearson, who so we kind of collapsed on each other and just couldn't get to the ball in time. But it's just funny how vivid the memory is after 30 years or whatever it's been. Not quite 30, but 25 years it's been since that game. So certainly high school soccer had a big impact on me. And, since then, for a while, Hopkinton and Bow were in the same division. And so there was always good storylines with me coaching the Hopkinton boys against the Bow guys, who are now coached by my high school coach growing up, who was also the brother of the current Guilford coach, who I knew growing up, and he would come to our Concord High games to cheer on his brother. And so I would know Dave Pinkham growing up, and now I'm coaching against him at Guilford and his brother at Bow. And so it's just kind of interesting.
That's pretty cool. I think it's kind of neat in New Hampshire how, like, unique to New Hampshire sports, how we have like a smaller state, so it's more easy to find those connections, where I think a bigger state you might not have that. So I appreciate that. I think that's very cool. Another connection that I noticed that came up was Mike Zahn. You used to play club soccer with him in the spring.
That's right. One of the that junior year, fall of '95, when we lost to Salem, in the spring of that year, Coach Zahn, myself, a couple other guys from the capital area played on a club team together down in Amherst, actually. So we'd commute down to Amherst a couple days a week. That was coached by a couple of guys, John Root and Ben Brewster, who are still kind of kicking around in the New Hampshire soccer community that guys might know. So Mike and Coach Zahn and I would commute down to Amherst to play. And actually that spring, we ended up beating that same Salem team. Well, not the same Salem team, but a club version of Salem soccer, in the club state championship in a shootout again, that sent us to the regional tournament over, I think that year was over in Niagara. So yeah, kind of interesting to play with Coach John growing up and then be coaching in Hopkinton alongside him 25 years on.
That's pretty cool. You used to also do ski in high school. You did alpine skiing. What was that experience like?
Yep. I raced alpine at Concord High, which I'm a mediocre ski racer, but in the high school scheme of things, I could hold my own. And so it was a good time. I mean, high school ski racing is about getting out there on the mountain, skiing a lot, having fun. And we certainly did that. My coach in high school was a guy named Scott Workman, coincidentally, who you talk about connections, but Scott's sons, he now lives in Guilford, and Scott's sons and grandsons even now played on the Guilford soccer team. So I've been coaching against my high school ski coach's grandsons over the last series of years.
No
So
kidding. That's cool.
there's always there's connections all over the place.
Yeah, for sure. So you played club soccer in the spring, freshman year to junior year. Then you decided to give that up and start playing track your senior season. Was that because you were trying to get better for the senior year of soccer, and then you didn't have a senior season after that that had already passed, so you decided to go to track?
Right. So I played, competitive club soccer uh, because I like playing soccer, but also as a means to an end to play college soccer. And by the time spring of my senior year rolled around, I knew that I didn't want to play college soccer, and I wasn't as worried about recruitment and that kind of stuff. So I decided I wasn't going to play club soccer that year. And a lot of my friends were serious runners. One guy in particular got recruited to go run up at Dartmouth, and so I ended up running track with them my spring year, which was a great time, was a lot of fun. Obviously not my number one sport. I didn't take it too seriously, but we had a good time on the track team. And, even to this day, I mean, last weekend I went to the cross country divisional championships, and I still really appreciate watching high school running. So I was happy I did that. Track's a good sport for high school athletes that spring's not their main season. Track's a good way to stay in shape and to have fun.
That's good to hear. So after high school, you went out to Colorado, University of Colorado. What did you study there?
Yep. So I went to the University of Colorado. As I told you, I was mostly looking. One of the big attractions there was that they did not have a soccer team. I was so burnt out on goalkeeping and soccer when I was a senior in high school that the last thing I wanted was anything to do with soccer. So I purposely seeked out a school that hadn't been recruiting me, and obviously they hadn't because they didn't have a team. So I went out there and I studied aerospace engineering for 3.5 years before switching late in my college career to get my degree in economics. And I graduated with an undergrad degree in economics. But no, Boulder's a great town. It was fun. I got a lot of skiing in, which was a big goal of going to Colorado, and it was certainly a positive experience.
That's good. You eventually became a teacher, but before we get to that, there was a little bit of gap in time, and you were a police officer for a short while. What happened there? Where were you, and how did you get into it?
So I've obviously kind of been through in a short period of time there, and early in my life, I went through a lot of careers. In my whole life growing up, my parents were teachers and administrators in schools and that kind of thing. But I went to school for engineering, graduated with a degree in economics. When I graduated from college, I was working for an event planning company. So initially I ran some big events for them in the Denver area. Then I moved back to New Hampshire thinking I wanted to be manage retail stores. Had a short run with that at a clothing store in the Newington Mall that quickly figured out that wasn't for me. Became a police officer thinking that would be an interesting career. So I worked for about a year in the Conway Police Department, went to the part-time police academy. And then when it came time, after about a year, you have to go to the full-time academy. And I knew that wasn't the career for me. So before I committed to the full-time academy, I left there. And then I started applying for teaching jobs, given that I had so much math background in my engineering studies, and ended up eventually starting part-time in Hopkinton and then transitioning after a couple of years to full-time.
What's your advice for people who are, in that younger age group, coming out of high school or college, kind of trying to find their path if they haven't found it yet?
I don't know that I have any advice. I went through a number of careers in a short period of time and eventually found my place. But I don't think there's anything wrong with those people. Maybe if people are thinking, man, what the heck is wrong with me? I don't know what I want to do. All I would say is I think a lot of people that might seem like they're set in their careers at this point in life probably went through in many iterations earlier in life. And I think most people eventually find their place.
All right, so you come here and we'll get to teaching now. So you were a teacher at Hopkinton. What was your first year here?
Yep. Yeah, I started teaching here. Yep. My first year, I think this is my 20th year. So
2002.
something around 2002. Yeah.
So why'd you want to become a teacher?
So I'd been coaching soccer when I was in college. And so obviously I liked the sport of soccer. I'd been working with younger kids and, I knew my math. I enjoyed math. So I knew that teaching, I would like the math and I would like the students. It's just the actual teaching part of it that I hadn't gone to college for. But math is it's called a critical shortage area in New Hampshire and has been since I started, that basically they'll hire people that, that for some reason have a history of working with students and know their math. And that was me. So, so I started teaching here and actually the first couple of years I was the old science teacher, Mr. Dixon's assistant coach for a few years. And then before I took over as head coach when he retired from coaching. And now I've been the head coach here for 17 years.
All right, so soccer coach, we'll definitely get to that in a minute, but first I wanted to get to the ski coaching. You were the ski coach here from 2005 to 2009, came up short with the ski jumping championship in 2006 as the runner-up. However, came back the next year in 2007 and won the state championship for ski jumping. So can you tell me what happened there and the progress? How'd you enjoy doing that? Stuff like that.
Yeah. So when I grew up ski racing in New Hampshire, I raced at Concord High, but also raced at Pat's Peak. Coached for a couple of years by Bob Berliner, who just retired as the Hopkinton coach. He took over a few years after I left when my son was born. So I coached skiing for about 5 years before my son was born. And it was for a few years, it was me alongside another guy named Greg Peterson, who continued to coach mostly the ski jumping team. He had coached both. So Bob Berliner had coached the alpine team back before I took over. And then Greg Peterson for a while had both this alpine team and the ski jumping team. And then when I came on board, I had the alpine team. Greg had the jumping team that I helped out with. And then Greg stepped back. And so for a while, it was just me with boys and girls alpine and the ski jumping, with a couple other people helping out here and there. And then once my son was born, then I stepped back from that to focus on coaching soccer. So I love coaching skiing. Obviously, I'm hired again this winter to be the ski coach again. Me and Mr. Chapin are going to coach the alpine team together. So obviously I liked it before. I'm excited to coach it again. It's a good time. I like being out there. I like helping kids get better at skiing. I like that it's a no-cut team. So there are people who are out there ski racing who don't really know a lot about skiing, and to show them how to be a better skier is very fulfilling. So that's exciting. As far as the ski jump championship in 2007, that was an interesting year because that was a year I also won the soccer championship. So it ended up that I had a number of guys who won the soccer championship. That year we only lost a game or two, if that. And then we went on and won the ski jump championship. And then a bunch of those guys went on and won the lacrosse championship that spring. So my seniors that year that basically went undefeated in championships. It was a great year for them.
Yeah, I just checked it out. So you had only two losses, 16-2 and 2 in your soccer season in 2007. So now let's get to that. You've been the soccer coach here since 2006. You were Mr. Dixon's assistant since I think 2004 and 2005. So you did that for 2 seasons. And then you come here as the head coach, take over in 2006. And right after that, you win 4 consecutive state championships in 2006, 2007, 2008, and 2009. And then one more again. You won your fifth in 2013 and your sixth in 2016. I believe you're the coach with the most state championships in an individual sport in Hopkinton right now. So that's pretty impressive accomplishment. How were you able to do that?
Good players, basically. I took over the team and we had graduated a bunch of good players that previous year. Guys I still know and stay in contact with a little bit, but then I took over a group of guys that kind of knew how to, once they figured out that they were going to win some games and it wasn't a rebuilding year, they kind of took over from there and had big belief in themselves and beat some good teams along the way to get that first state championship in 06. So it was a cool experience to take over that year with guys that were so determined to do well.
Yeah, so once you got that done in 2006, did you kind of feel like, okay, now we're the favorite, now we have the confidence, and did the other ones come easier?
Nothing comes easy. Like the Guilford coach, same coach now, this guy Dave Pinkham. When I was a kid, he was still the Guilford coach. And there was one time they went 10 years straight without losing a game, including championships each year, which is just bananas. Like I can't even comprehend it. So, there's 1 year in my career that we haven't lost a game in the last 17 years. So it's a real hard thing to do to go undefeated. And in those first 4 years when we won state championships, it was really cool, but there was a lot of turnover each year. So every year you're rethinking what you want to do as a team, how you want to play, how different pieces fit into the puzzle. And that's the fun chess match of coaching. Who fits in where and what do we do against different teams and how does it all come together? That's the part I really like.
I want to ask you about the 2013 season. You touched on that briefly. That was your undefeated season, 19-0. So undefeated season, that's super rare. So how did you end up going 19-0? And how did Eli Manning not get in your way?
Well, mostly Eli Manning's just kind of chucks the ball and hopes for the best, and he gets lucky in big games. So I wasn't really too worried about his skill holding me back. So I just focused on my soccer guys, and they played very well that year. We won a lot of games. We had a lot of skill, and then managed to get by another good team in the semifinal game to get through to the championship and win the championship. So it was a good showing that year. We had some really fast guys up top, very dominant, who then came back as seniors the following year and also didn't lose a game that year until the 0-0 championship game that we ended up losing in a shootout. So we were very close to 2 straight undefeated seasons in a row. It was a good run and some real good players there that made coaching easy.
All right, most recent state championship for you, 2016. What do you have to say about that team?
Again, I think the best teams are the ones that have the most fun. They really, played loose, had fun, just went out there and played soccer. And and I always tell the story of one of the last games of the year that year. I think we were at that point the 2 seed or the 3 seed, and we went to Stevens late on a Friday night to play Stevens was either the 2 or the 3 seed, and we were the other one. And not really sure what was going to happen. It was game 15 maybe, and ended up winning that game 6-1. And I remember that game very clearly because it was kind of like, man, maybe we got something here. So then we got in the playoffs. There was a big upset of the number 1 seed that year, so we ended up having an easier run to the championship game than I probably would have even thought we would have. and then ended up playing Stevens again in the championship game. So one of the last games of the year, 15th or 16th game, we beat Stevens by 5 goals and get in the championship game, and you're not really sure what to expect. How do you prep for a game like that? And we did our best. They had one really exemplary player, probably the best individual talent in the state that year. And we tried to do our best to prepare. And in the end, only ended up winning that championship game 1-0. They had a number of chances. They easily could have scored some goals and won that game. And we managed to salvage the 1-0 victory. But it was a good lesson in, okay, it's not over till it's over. Just because we won that previous game at the end of the season by 5 goals doesn't mean anything. And the championship game was a completely different game. So we've used that lesson over the last few years about big wins and big losses. You certainly can turn them around in the same year.
Your career record is 239, 59 and 20. That's an outstanding record. Very high win percentage. Like, those are some crazy numbers. How are you able to do that and like have consistency with your teams?
Well, my goal every year is that guys show up fit. And some years we have more success with that than others, but my goal is that we show up fit so we can take that out of the equation. My goal is that any given year, we take all that extraneous stuff out of the equation and just focus on the soccer. So can we get guys to show up at practice on time? Can we get them to show up with the right gear? Can we get guys to not get in trouble at school, not have trouble with their grades, so that it can all be about the soccer? I think that you run into a lot of high school athletes that get distracted from it being about the sport, and they end up not doing well in class. So they don't focus on their academics enough. And then that becomes an impediment to them doing well in their sport. You see guys not concerned about being fit for the season. So then all of a sudden we have to deal with fitness, and we're not talking about skill on the soccer field. So as much as we can, we like to focus on what's going on with the soccer. And I think that's a big help. And then we spend a lot of time working with game film. I think that's a big benefit that my guys, that we try to keep over other teams, is good, high quality game film, and watch and analyze it every game. So I talk to my guys a lot about being good losers, that we don't typically win every game of the season. But what we are is, we're going to lose a game, we're going to figure out what happened, and we're going to fix it so that it doesn't happen again. And so we try to be good losers all the time. And I think that focusing on the soccer and being good losers are 2 big keys for success.
This season was a little bit more of a struggle for you. Team lost in the first round, unfortunately. So you lost a lot of seniors from the prior season. How do you deal with that and try and overcome that? And now that this has happened, what are you looking at building upon moving forward to try and get better next year? What, things do you go back to, like your rule of thumb to try and improve?
So yeah, coming into the season, we graduated 12 guys last year. So it was a significant loss of players off our team. But I think what I didn't fully comprehend is also throughout their life in such a small town, as those 12 kids went through the system, they kind of dominated the atmosphere for the kids right below them. So now I have, 3 returning seniors, or I had 3 returning seniors this fall, and 2 other seniors that were on the team. And they had never really been in that role as being the top dog. And as far as even play on the field, there was a lot that had to be relearned. My juniors, I have good skill in my senior class, good skill in the junior class this year, but so much of that oxygen had been taken up by the big class last year, that we really had to start from square one this year. And it's not anybody's fault. It's just a product of living in a small town and being behind such a monster class of soccer players. So the guys all season worked hard. They worked their butts off. Even in, the last game of the year might have been our best game of the year. And although the score ended up being ugly and we were knocked out in the first round, it was a very competitive game that a few bounces here and there, believe it or not, who knows what would have happened. They scored a couple at the end to make the score. looked like it had gotten out of hand, but it wasn't really till the end that happened. So it was a very competitive game. Everybody played very hard. It was our best game of the season. So I think that there is good groundwork there for next year. That I think that really eventually, as the season wore on, people started to understand this is how we have to play defense. This is what we need to do offensively. And it did kind of come together that last game, and we had a number of unfortunate bounces and other incidents in the game that in the end we didn't get the upset victory in that game. But I think at this point I see promise in the guys that are coming back, and I think that I think we've set ourselves up well for next year to really get after it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Zipke. I appreciate you coming on the program.
Sure, thank you.